All right, let's talk rod, reel, and line for walleyes. Specifically, I'm gonna share what I deem to be just the best all-around setup for 80+% of the tactics that you're gonna use for walleyes all season long. So in this video, I'm gonna break down just some of the stats behind what I'm looking for, so you can go to the store, pick up whatever brand that you want, specifically with the stats that I'm talking about, and you should be really happy with what you got. But I'm also gonna talk specifically what I have in my hand, because, you know, just want you guys to know specifically what I'm using as well. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So first things first, let's talk about the rod. So the stats on the rod that I like to use for most tactics is a 7-foot rod, medium light power, and a fast action. So if you look on the rod, it's gonna say, you know, 7 foot, and then it's gonna say ML F. So that's the rod I'm using for just about everything. What I like about this rod specifically, 7 foot is just a good all-around length. There are some specialty cases where I like to have something longer, and it's usually gonna be, you know, like Lindy rigging. Another thing might be bobber fishing. I like to have a little bit of a longer rod, but for the most part, most of the things I'm doing, jigging, drop shot fishing, all that, I love a 7-foot rod. And I also try to have kind of a consistent length, because I do think that, you know, when I'm using all these different baits and I'm casting at fish, or I'm casting at weed lines or anything like that, it is nice to have the same rod length, because it just helps you be a little bit more consistent when you're casting. So 7 foot is a good length. Medium light power. So this is not a big whooping stick. You know, if you're gonna be throwing rattle baits, sometimes glide baits, there's a few different times, maybe like big swim baits. There's a few different times where I like to have a medium power rod, but this is a medium light, and this is gonna be good for 80% of the stuff that you're gonna be doing. So what's nice about this is you do have enough power, you know, to fight just about any fish that you wanna fight, but basically what I like to do is I like to pair the fact that I'm using this lighter line. I'm trying to be more finesse. So I have a rod that, yes, it has some power, but it's also kind of soft enough where you can play those fish and have a little bit of play in your system. So when you're fighting a really, really big fish, this is just gonna do a good job with it. And so then the action of this rod, the fast action, you know, you can do an extra fast where it probably breaks, you know, probably 8 or 9 inches from the tip. But for me, when I'm jigging fish, a lot of times I'm using live bait. I want that fish to kind of take it for a couple seconds. And with that extra fast action, sometimes they can, you know, feel you sort of about the same time you can feel them. So there are some tactics where an extra fast is nice, but for most of the time, a fast is just gonna be perfect. It's gonna be almost that, you know, happy medium where it's breaking about 1.5 feet or so, maybe a couple feet. Yeah, about 1.5 feet or so from the tip of the rod. And that's just gonna be perfect for, first of all, working your bait. You know, you have a fast enough action that you can work the bait efficiently, and you know what you're doing with the bait, but it's also soft enough that, you know, the fish is not going to feel you quite as well. So that's what I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about the rod reel line setup. This one right here specifically is a tuned up Apex T1. Like I said, 7 foot, medium light, fast action. I love this stick. It's super, super nice. It's also, you know, pretty pricey because it is a high-end rod, you know, handmade, stuff like that. So, or handmade here, I should say, in the US. So it's gonna be more expensive, but it is nice. If you go to a store, you wanna get something cheaper, just remember 7 foot, medium light, fast action. That's what I like for most things. And even some of the tactics that might be better with something slightly different, you can get away with this. This is just a good happy medium for a lot of different things. So that's the rod. Now let's get into the reel. So I'm actually gonna show you what I got right here. From a stats standpoint, I like a 2,000 or like a 3,000 size reel. For the most part, I actually prefer a 3,000 size reel when I can get it. 2,000 is gonna be totally fine. very similar to a 3000, but the 3000 size reels are just a little bit bigger. For some brands, they might end up being just a little bit heavier, but for the most part, it should be pretty close to the 2000. But the nice part about the 3000 is with it being a little bit bigger, there's just more room in those reels for gearing and stuff like that. So that's generally the size that I like. We got some waves coming up here, so it might get a little bit rocky. Kind of a busy lake here. But anyway, yes, but okay, so that's the size I'm looking for roughly. But another very important thing is, actually probably the most important thing, is having a rod that has, having a reel that has really, really good drag. So if you got a few different reels in your box, or you know, a few different reels laying around, the biggest thing is going to be which one has the very, very best drag. So pretty simple. I'm not sure what else to hit on with the reel. The one I have on right here specifically is Piscifun Carbon X2 3000 size. Like I said before, I like to always have the bigger size if I can. I have some 3000s, I have some 2000s that I'm using in the summer, but I definitely prefer 3000s whenever I can. So I've been super impressed with this reel, by the way. I got a bunch of them this past winter, and for me, the biggest thing with reels is how is the drag gonna perform in the winter? And honestly, the drag was better on this than some of my fancier reels that I've had for a few years. So I was super impressed by it. And I think these are like $70-ish, give or take, depending on what deals or whatever they're running on the website. So honestly, like, you wanna go get a super fancy reel, spend a bunch of money, you can do that, you'll be super happy. But I think if you do wanna save a little bit of money, these are super, super nice too. So that's specifically what I'm using on the reel side. So on the line side, braided line is what I like to use for the most part as my main line. If I have a bunch of these 7-foot medium light fast action rods, 2000, 3000 size reels, if I've got a bunch of these rigged up, I'm gonna have braid on almost all of them. So 10-pound braid, 8-pound braid, I like both of those. I know some people that'll go up to 12-pound braid. The higher weight you have for braid, just kind of the stiffer it's gonna be. Sometimes you could argue that you lose a little bit of castability with heavier braid, but you end up having less issues, you know, with line wrapping around the tip or something like that. For me, I found 10-pound to be that sweet spot where the castability is super good, and I'm also not having that line just going all over the place, because the light line is just so flexible. It just wraps around things. So yeah, 10-pound braid is what I'm using. Specifically, this is that new Suffix Revolve line. That's kind of supposed to be like their finesse line. So, you know, if you like using 8-pound or something like that, a lot of times you're going to want to upsize that, because the diameter is super light on this braid specifically. This is a higher end braid. I'm not saying you have to get this. You know, it's going to be a little bit more expensive, but a lot of braid brands are good. There's a lot of different good braid out there. One thing that you can actually do too is just get a few different types of braid. And, you know, usually you're changing out braid every few years or so. So find something that you like, play around with a bunch of different brands, but I've really been liking this Suffix Revolve this season. So another thing that you'll notice as well is that I have high visibility line. So this is super bright. That's something I always grew up just using kind of like dark green line, black line, stuff like that, which is, you know, line color. So I wasn't, growing up, I didn't think a lot about line color, but having this high visibility line is super nice, especially when you're using super light finesse presentations, or even when you're ripping, you know, and fishing, kind of power fishing or whatever. It's nice to just be able to see the line a lot easier. And what that allows is that it allows you to actually like see bites sometimes. Sometimes you'll see the line jump a little bit, like if you're using a jerk bait, anything like that, or even if you're just kind of jigging on slack line, or, you know, kind of softly jigging like a jig or a drop shot or something, you can actually sometimes see that line get pulled before you can actually feel it. So having high visibility line is something that I really like. But one thing that's really, really critical to me is that I have a big long fluorocarbon leader on here. So I guess what I have is at least 10 pounds. I actually think I've probably got almost 13, excuse me, at least 10 feet, excuse me, 10 feet. I might have like 13 plus feet of fluorocarbon on here right now. So I'm connecting that fluorocarbon with a uni-to-uni knot. If you practice up a bunch or you're just sitting on the couch in a controlled environment, the best knot for connecting braid to fluorocarbon is going to be an FG knot, as long as you successfully tie it efficiently. But if you're out on the boat, it's a really, really difficult knot to tie, and it can take a long time. So when you're just hanging out and you want to tie up a bunch of rods, FG knot's going to be a go-to. But anyway, 10 foot plus fluorocarbon leader, and for me, I think probably the best all-around weight for that fluorocarbon is going to be 8 pounds. On a couple or a few different tactics, I'll actually downsize that down to 6 pound, and that's just because I'm fishing on a lot of super clear, a lot of pressured bodies of water, where it definitely pays to have as light a line as you can. So like super finesse jigging, like 1/8 ounce jig, 1/16 ounce jig, and then also like a drop shot and a bobber. Those are kind of like the main situations where I actually will downsize to 6 pound tests, but 8 pound is going to be my go-to for most things. And then also like if you're using like a jerk bait or like a big, you know, gliding jig, something like that, going up to 10, going up to 12 pound fluoro can definitely help. And then I will say, if you're fishing like dirtier water situations, there's probably never really a reason to use 6 pound. And some people will actually tie like jigs directly to the braid in those situations. For me, I still like to use fluorocarbon, even if it's dirty water and getting bites, you know, is easy or whatever. I still like to have some sort of fluorocarbon leader in those situations for basically 2 reasons. First of all, it's nice to have a little bit of stretch in your system. If you just have straight braid and you hook up with a big giant walleye, you know, obviously you're gonna have some give in your rod system. You're gonna have drag in your reel, but I like to have just a little bit of give for my line, and fluorocarbon stretches just a little bit. So that's kind of nice, even if you're in dirty situations. And then another really big reason is, you know, like if you take 10, 12, even 14 pound fluorocarbon and put that on above your jig or whatever bait you're using, you're just gonna have it, you're just gonna be able to save a lot more baits from toothy critters like pike. So braided line, pike will just shear right through braid, even if it's thicker braid. So having a heavier fluorocarbon leader can help with those toothy critters. So yeah, and then as far as like specifically what fluorocarbon I'm using, I have Suffix Advanced Fluoro is what I've been using. So I don't work with Suffix or whatever. That's just the line I happen to be using. There's a bunch of other good brands out there. I have some Cigar fluorocarbon that I'll use as well. Whatever the yellow box, I can't remember the name of it. So anyway, there's a bunch of different brands to play around with, and I'm even still playing around with different brands and different types of stuff. So that's pretty much the rundown. This is my favorite all-around walleye rod reel line setup. Just a quick recap: 7 foot long rod, medium light power, fast action, and then a reel that has a good drag. That's the biggest thing. If you hook up with a 28, a 29, a 30-inch walleye, those things are super tough. Tougher than any bass you're gonna hook up with. And that may be it might be a controversial statement, might hurt some feelings, but a big 30-inch walleye is so powerful. It'll fight you like a big pike. I mean, they are super, super tough. They might not have as much endurance as a big pike, but they can make super hard runs just like them. So where the heck was I going? Yeah, so the drag is super, super important. Make sure you got a good drag. If your drag is getting rough on your reel, you might have to re-grease it or something like that. Clean it out, re-grease it. But yeah, drag is huge, 2,000 to 3,000 size reel, and then 10-pound braided line is what I like to use, and then an 8-pound or a 6-pound fluorocarbon leader, at least 10 foot, especially if you're fishing these clear bodies of water. So that's a quick rundown. Hopefully you guys picked up a few tips on this one. I probably have, I don't even know, 10 of these in my boat, and a handful of other like technique specific setups as well set up. So, and that plane is loud. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but anyway, that's the whole video. Thanks for watching.